Are the Star Wars movies overrated? Do people still enjoy them like they did before? The answer to those questions may never be fully resolved, because everyone has their own opinion, but regardless, I'm going to give it a try.
We went to Hamburger Hamlet on Hollywood Boulevard, right across from Grauman's Chinese Theater. And they said, boy, something's going on out there. Must be a premiere or something. And it wasn't until we walked outside that we could see that it was Star Wars.
If I could have traveled back in time and experienced the premiere of A New Hope, my understanding of what this iconic movie meant to people would be different, even if I'm obviously aware of its huge popularity and how it revolutionized the film industry as a whole. The special effects and George Lucas' implementation of the fundamental elements of religion, in other words, the Force, made it extremely special, because A New Hope was the first of its kind. If your everyday Joe that hasn't seen any Star Wars begins to watch this film on Disney+, I think his review would vary quite a bit in contrast to what people thought about it in 1977, by the very simple reason of the film being almost 50 years old now. I myself can't stand the people that choose to compare the original trilogy to modern standards. It isn't fair at all. Everything was different back then. How you talked, how you wrote scenes, what you could express on screen, etc. Episode 4, 5 and 6 aren't masterpieces or perfect films, though you could make the argument that Empire Strikes Back is pretty close to it, and that's probably why people today push them aside more often than, let's say, 20 years ago. But when these movies arrived, they were absolutely the best of the bunch, and today they're called classic films for a reason.
You just may have noticed that Star Wars, the latest episode, opens nationally at midnight tonight.
The hype surrounding this movie has been overwhelming. Now the question is, will it deliver?
They're about to open the doors here in just a few minutes, and people are revved up. 2.2 million Americans from New York to hell.
To make a prequel to the revolutionary original films were almost an impossible task to begin with. The entire world would be watching, and as a result also be criticizing every little flaw. And sadly, the prequel trilogy had a few of them.
You saved my again!
What's this?
Despite the many imperfections, I love episode 1, 2 and 3 for a number of reasons. You can't deny the optimistic world building and clever visual storytelling, the brilliant illustration of how a democracy falls, and the fleshed out perspective of why the mighty Jedi Order in a sense destroyed itself. I think George unfortunately decided to make these films 10 to 15 years before they truly could have flourished. The ideas were way too substantial to fit in 3 movies. The CGI could have been upgraded to a higher quality with today's equipment, and the climactic events in episode 3 could have been even more emotional if the cornerstone story and world would have been fleshed out to a greater extent. However, the prequels still looks fantastic, and I don't deny that George put his heart and soul into them. Yet they are confusing, and the dialogue is quite flawed at certain places.
I don't like sand.
People have been hating on these 3 films since they premiered, so overrated might not be the best description here. They have their own beauty and charm, their own thought-provoking scenes, but just as the originals, they are far from flawless. If you haven't watched the Clone Wars animated series, you should do that, because that show elevates the prequels into something even better.
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 47.
It's a trap!
The idea that Star Wars is living on nostalgia is a valid consideration. You watch these films as a kid and you fancy them, and because of it they live on within you despite the many flaws they might have. People hold these movies in such high regard because of the sentimentality combined with the impact it had on society and film. Maybe the Star Wars movies are overrated, and that certain parts of the films is what makes them them iconic and remembered. That the special effects and the execution of them in the originals is what should be cherished and not the overall films themselves. Or that the idea and concept of the prequels should be discussed as a textbook example of creativity that could have been expressed in an improved way with better writing and more screen time to play with. Whatever could have been, Star Wars still holds a special place in my heart, and I don't really care if people think they are overrated or not. These movies could change your perspective of the world, of your friends, as well as your family, and that's what I think is so brilliant about them. While they also display talking animals, space wizards, awesome special effects, and so much more. True entertainment with a deeper meaning is how I would describe Star Wars. How would you explain these movies to a friend that has never seen them before? Put it in the comment section below. If you want to watch another Star Wars video, why don't you click the one to the left of you? Thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. But most importantly, may the Force be with you.